Hi, I'm Old Norse Specialist Dr. Jackson Crawford. After years of receiving requests for audio content, my good friend Dr. Luke Gorton and I recorded a pilot for a podcast in July 2022. And then, since technology frightens and confuses me, I was unable to figure out how to make a podcast out of it. But YouTube now offers YouTube podcasts, and I'm making it available here. So we'll be interested to know whether this is content that our audiences want, and particularly I'd like to know if my Patreon supporters want to have some of this audio-only content as part of what they're supporting. Speaking of which, by the way, as a house cleaning thing before I give you this podcast episode from July 2022, let me mention that now in May 2023, I'm about to take my annual 1-week break from posting videos. So Wednesday, May 18th and Friday, May 20th, there will not be a video as usual. Gives my assistant Stella a little bit of a break and takes some of the pressure off of me to keep the pipeline of videos being created on quite so tight a schedule. Well, again, I hope that you will take some interest in this video / audio, and yeah, especially on Patreon, let me know if this kind of audio product is more of what is something you want to see more of. The title, Ling Circus, is of course a reference to Ring Circus, just that we are two linguists. And it's sort of a circus when we're together, right? We're just so, it's entertaining as a bear doing tricks or something. Well, for now, from beautiful Wyoming, let me wish you all the best. Yeah, all right. Well, this is Ling Circus. I don't know. It's a stupid title, but I can't think of anything better. Do you have an idea?
I like it. No, I think it's catchy.
Okay.
I think it works.
I thought...
Accurate.
Yeah, I mean, I had a kind of a notion that maybe we could do some kind of mythological reference. The only problem with that is I think it probably makes the actual topics seem more focused than they are on myth.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
There are moods in which I would hate whatever the reference was. So,
Sure. No, I mean, linguistics is just such a diverse field, right? There's so many things that we can say that linguistics is like our sort of central focus, and then just bring in all sorts of things.
Yeah. So this is
Which is why linguistics programs are so much fun, because there's always somebody doing something that's different.
Exactly. All right.
Like, where else can you have Kaylee and Tim Hannon in the same program?
That is you know the concept of like false range, where someone says something like they had everything from acorns to zoos, but acorns and zoos aren't in any kind of similar category. Like Kaylee and Tim seem like a false range that way, right?
I mean, to be fair, Tim is not in academia anymore, and he decided that it was inadequate to his purposes. So he probably agreed with that.
Fair. Yeah, I'm not making fun of him. I just you pick two people who are so different that it's
right.
It's not
well, that was part of the point. Like they're very different people, very different ways of thinking, but they were both attracted to that department, right?
Yeah. And
now, granted, Tim lasted one semester.
Yeah, and Kaylee is still running. He'd be a cool person to have on.
Sure.
Actually, that brings up something up to me, which is, you and I, we are not the same people, but I think we have a lot of things in common. We both have, I don't know, just a disposition in common, right? I mean, we're sort of, we have one foot in the kind of everyday world that I think often academics lose, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah, neither of us are ivory tower academics. We don't limit ourselves to the academic bubble.
Yeah. Well, and I don't feel like the academic bubble is necessarily even that welcoming now. Part of that was shaped by my particular experiences as an instructor, especially at UC Berkeley, where being non-tenured faculty, there were tenured faculty who wouldn't even talk to me.
Right.
And also kind of a feeling that like the sort of cultural background that I come from and still identify with is so at odds with what people identify with academia. But so, and it's not exactly like there's necessarily a tension in me between them. It's more like I just am both in the way that, you know, a truck can be blue and a Chevy. there's a
sure.
a redneck analogy for it.
Right.
So yeah, I'm Jackson Crawford.
Okay, and
my co-host, Claire Gordon. We should probably say that at some point.
Hello. Right.
Do we want to go?
Of
with
course, like we're gonna have like a. What was that?
Do we want to go with the doctors in introducing ourselves?
I can see both sides of that argument. I don't know. I don't care either way.
Here's
what do you think?
Actually,
what do you think your people would think, your fans or whatever?
This is a complicated question because I did a video maybe a year ago, maybe more than that, where I said that I wasn't going to introduce myself as doctor anymore. And it got kind of wildly misinterpreted as me saying, you know, don't ever call me doctor or something like that. And really what I meant was that I felt pretentious introing myself that way because I tell you what, I look at a book that has, you know, Bob Smith, PhD on it, or Dr. Bob Smith on it as the author, and I think that PhD has nothing to do with what this book is about. Like I feel like it's
90% of the time it doesn't.
Yeah, it's a devalued currency in identifying people in a way. I think that a doctorate degree has a lot of value, but it's such an easy thing to claim that I feel like it's better for me to not throw it in your face. It's better for me to like let you realize that I have a doctorate than for me to just come out and say, you know, call me this. Obviously, people who are in a student-like position to me, I still appreciate the doctor thing. I just don't insist on it really vociferously. I'm not one of those guys who goes to, you know, Ace Hardware and introduces himself as Dr. Crawford. That seems off to me. Not a good way to get good help.
Yeah, and I mean, maybe it's just because we've both done it, and once you know you can do something without some crazy amount of effort. I don't know how you feel about your doctorate, but I don't feel like mine was just the hardest, craziest thing I've ever done. Like, it was a lot of work, but I could do it again. I could do it more. So I don't really feel like it's not the first thing that I think about when I think of like my top accomplishment of all time. So like, it's not what I would lead with. Now, to be fair, I don't have a top accomplishment of all time that is in my head that's more than that. I mean, it was 5 years of work, but my bachelor's degree was 4 years of work, and our master's degree was 2 years of work, and that was a hard 2 years of work. So even as far as the academic programs that I have personally completed, I don't actually think the PhD was the hardest for me.
Was their master's the hardest, you think?
I think my bachelor's was the hardest. I put in a lot of work in those 4 years. A lot of intense paper writing and things that, now granted, my PhD program had a lot of intense paper writing too. And I think it's also important to note that obviously the PhD program was after the bachelor's degree. So by the time I got to the PhD, I had already been prepared with all this intense preparation, right? I didn't know it was preparation at the time, but the bachelor's degree was harder for me at the time than the PhD was later on. And again, if I had done them the other way, I may well say the opposite, right? But the PhD was not a huge step up from the bachelor's, and so I was, you know, put through boot camp, I guess you could say. And so when I got to the PhD, I'm like, this isn't that much of a challenge compared to what I've already been through.
I think that's an interesting point. I had never considered that. As I consider it now, my classwork for my master's was probably harder than my classwork for my PhD, just because at Georgia, as you know,
100%.
we did so many different languages.
It's an incredibly rigorous program, and Klein is very old school. So just having him in the program and being like, well, you did good, you got a C. And he's not disappointed. He's actually just giving you just an honest grade, right? There's no grade inflation.
I worked so hard for a C in Vedic. it's
right.
I mean, actually, so this is a good point maybe to talk a little bit about our bios, because part of our bios is shared and part is not. Yeah. So do you want to give us a quick sense of your, not in the sense of a document that you put on a school website, but your curriculum vitae?
Yeah. Well, as mentioned, I have a bachelor's degree, a master's, and a PhD, all in different fields, which I think is that I would call that a strength. In fact, if I was gonna lead with something, maybe it would be that. Noting that I've done 4 different collegiate and completed 4 different collegiate programs that are in 4 different but related fields. So I don't just have a narrow focus. Now, for some people in academia, that's a negative, and I think that's a real problem with academia today. That people are so focused in their really quite narrow fields that they can't see outside those walls. But then sometimes they make the mistake of thinking that since they're an expert in a very narrow area, they know what's going on in other areas, and they may not.
It's something that's used.
That's something that we always have to be careful of.
It's something people use against other people, but never apply to themselves, right? I mean, this I see this all the time. Actually, there's a guy who hates me, who has, worm-tongued all over the internet that, I'm just a linguist. Who am I to talk about myth? It's like, well, I was hired by 3 different universities to teach myth because I know this language. I know the stuff written in it. Like, I can appreciate it in its original language. What are you talking about? But like making it sound like there's an artificial distinction there, which some academics really do care about. But then I think that the most hypocritical thing is that we've all taught like freshman English comp, right? When we don't have English degrees, right? I mean, that's like a basic class that everyone in some humanities or language department is going to teach at some point or another, just because it gets numbers.
Yes.
So, and no one ever says, well, you don't have a PhD in, English rhetoric. So I just think that's pretty hilarious.
Right.
Anyway.
Yeah. I mean, it's a way to try to establish credibility, and it's a way to try to attack others on their credibility. And I think it's important to see that for what it is, as kind of a game, right? If somebody else is saying something you don't like, then just from a narratival standpoint, your goal is to try to discredit them, right? Because you don't want people to believe them. Even if they're right, one way you can undercut their argument, actually a great way to undercut their argument if they're right and you can't really attack it on the merits of the argument, is to attack them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? And to attack their credibility. I think we see this a fair amount, honestly.
Present day academic culture is all about shooting the messenger. Which is so anti-academic. Right? That's not how it should be at all. Well, and it's people end up kind of internalizing it and saying, well, I can't step over here. I mean, heck, I've had this, actually the same guy who hates me, has attempted to use this against me for not being Scandinavian, right? Like there's some cultural appropriation to me talking about Norse language and myth. It's like, I just don't understand it. If there was some Nigerian who had become an expert in Icelandic, I would listen to him about Icelandic. I just don't care if there's some Icelander who's an expert about Swahili. I will listen to him about Swahili. I don't care about this crap. But it's such an obsession. But of course, it's always again used against people. It's never like, at least people with status within academia don't apply it to themselves and say, well, I can't talk about, Japanese because I'm not Japanese. Well, you learn Japanese.
Right.
Yeah. But,
right.
Like,
or like, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, getting back to your bio, you said you have 4 different academic programs in 4 different but related fields. What are those for our listeners?
Yeah, my undergraduate was a double major, as you know, as many people do, and it was a double major in two pretty different programs. They didn't really overlap. Their classes didn't really overlap, so I really did do 2 separate degrees essentially, other than the prereqs, you know, like English and science, and had to take a college algebra course, which is the last math class that I've ever taken. But other than those, you know, there was really very little overlap. So one of the degrees was, I think you could call it a religion degree. It focused more on Judeo-Christian religion, but there were classes on other religions too. And the other degree was just a Spanish degree, just sort of a run-of-the-mill Spanish degree. Back when I was in college, I got to the point where I was basically fluent in Spanish because the upper level classes were in Spanish. So I had to, like, I would have failed if I didn't know Spanish taking those classes.
Right.
So those 2 programs didn't have much to do with each other, except for the fact that as part of the religion degree, I minored in biblical languages. So I think I understood pretty early on that if you want to understand a culture and their texts, you really need to speak their language, literally and metaphorically, right? We use that as a metaphor, but it's also literal.
Absolutely.
So I realized pretty quickly that if I was gonna understand the ancient world and the culture that the Bible came out of, it wasn't good enough to read this stuff in translation. I needed to actually be able to read the words of these people who wrote these things. So that's when I took 3 years of ancient Greek, and a year of biblical Hebrew. So,
and this was in
between
Knoxville.
the Greek and the Hebrew and the Spanish, Tennessee. Yeah, it was in Tennessee. Yeah. Not University of Tennessee, but around there. So small liberal arts college. What sort of bound all of those classes together for me was the languages. I realized that I really liked the languages. I really liked learning the languages. And I also had sort of a fairly unusual opportunity while in college to teach them, because since this was a small liberal arts college, we didn't really have graduate students. There was like a small graduate program, but they didn't really have a lot of connection with anything. So in bigger colleges like University of Georgia, for instance, or Ohio State, or Wisconsin, the graduate students do a lot of the lower level teaching, right? As we both did during our graduate careers. But when I was an undergrad, we didn't have that because it was just a small college. So what would happen is the more advanced undergrads would oftentimes be the TAs. And this was a really cool opportunity, before I even had a bachelor's degree, to teach college in some substantive fashion. So I was a TA for Greek and I was a TA for Spanish. Starting my sophomore year of college, I was 19 years old when I was first in front of a college class.
That's awesome.
And so I got a really early start on this. I didn't know it at the time. I was just sort of opening, going through doors that were open to me. But I was really able to figure out that I liked doing that, figure out that I liked teaching, figure out that I kind of had a knack for teaching. Students would, voluntarily come to my study sessions because they're like, man, you really explained this Greek better than the textbook. So I was like, maybe linguistics is the way to go. So that was why I decided to go to grad school in linguistics. I kind of had a hunch I wanted to go to grad school, but that helped me narrow it down to linguistics. And that's how we ended up meeting when we met in Athens at the University of Georgia in that graduate linguistics program.
Right.
And, the rest is history.
So you got your master's in linguistics. I often say historical linguistics just because that was such an emphasis of our program at the University of Georgia.
Yeah, but we did get the whole gamut of linguistic education, right? Like we had to take a required phonetics class, a required phonology class, a required syntax class, and I took morphology. I'm not sure if you took morphology. I don't think it was required, but I did take it.
No, I didn't.
And enjoyed it. And then of course we had. We had languages in contact together, the class which we will not speak of various events that happened in there, yes. Not for my sake, but for yours, of course.
Yes, notorious. One day, perhaps I'll be comfortable speaking of what happened there again. But we both got our masters in linguistics at the University of Georgia, and the program run by Dr. Jared Klein, still guiding light.
Who's still there, still going strong.
Absolutely. Still a friend to us both. I saw him for the first time in 9 years in April when I was down at the University of Georgia. That was awesome. Mm-hmm. And of course, one of our good friends, Mark Winthy, is now teaching there in the same program, who went through the same program we did. Then you went off to get your PhD at Ohio State.
Mm-hmm.
And
I decided, as we both did in that linguistics program, that we kind of narrowed down our focus while still maintaining our broad interest in linguistics. You decided that you wanted to focus more on Scandinavian language and culture, and I decided that I wanted to focus more on Mediterranean language and culture. And that led us to our respective PhD programs. So Ohio State was a good fit for me. I did the PhD in classics with a graduate certificate, which is kind of like a minor in ancient Mediterranean religions. So I was able to bring back in some of my interest in ancient Mediterranean religions that I've really been interested in for years, and did that program in an undergrad. It was a very language-focused program. You had to know your Greek and Latin and pass these intensive exams before you could make it halfway through the program. So that was pretty serious and rigorous. And another great thing about Ohio State is that it's a very interdisciplinary community. So we in the classics program, we had the opportunity to take classes with the linguists. So I knew the linguists at Ohio State, and they were a really cool group, and I became friends with them, and we would hang out sometimes. I also knew the people from what was called NELC, which is the Near Eastern Languages and Cultures Department, and they did ancient Babylonian and Akkadian and Egyptian and Sumerian and Israel, ancient Israel. So I took some classes from a couple of professors in that department. I became friends with the graduate students in that department and still am to this day. Some of my best friends that I made at Ohio State weren't even in my program. They were in other programs because it was just so interdisciplinary. And I met a lot of cool people there. And we had a lot of great discussions and still do.
And then talk a little bit about your teaching career. Where have you taught? What have you taught?
Yeah, well, when I was still at Ohio State, I had a couple of adjunct jobs. Essentially, Ohio State is located right in the middle of Ohio, and Ohio is noteworthy for just having a bunch of colleges, a bunch of small colleges. Most of them are not colleges that most people would have ever heard of. But these small liberal arts colleges dotted, around Columbus in every direction, they look to Ohio State as kind of the academic focus of that whole area. And so when they need someone to adjunct for a class, they'll usually call the appropriate department at Ohio State and say, hey, do you have any advanced grad students who would be able and willing to teach this class for us? Because we need someone to fill in, right? And so I did this at a couple of different colleges in the Columbus area when I was there. I taught Greek and Latin at one college. I taught several classes on ancient Judaism and the world of the New Testament, like graduate seminars. I was actually teaching graduate seminars while I was still in grad school, which was, again, a really cool experience, and sort of helped me, grow as a teacher. And I was doing all this as I was teaching at Ohio State, because at Ohio State we were teaching courses, Greek, Latin, classical mythology, things like that. So I was, again, I had been teaching in some capacity since undergrad, but then at Ohio State, I was really able to get a lot more teaching experience and sort of grow into the teacher that I ultimately became. And then I got the job at the University of New Mexico, which is where I still am today, 8 years later. So this started out as a temporary job, and it became a permanent job. Again, I think it's a good fit. It's a good program. I get to teach classes that are about the ancient world. They're about linguistics and language. They're about ancient religion. So they really sort of fall in my wheelhouse since, as I've been mentioning, language and religion, ancient language and religion, have really been my focus for basically my entire academic career. The only thing that sort of falls out of that would have been the Spanish major, because that was modern Spanish and not ancient Spanish. But you know what? Modern Spanish is just new Latin, right? Right. So even then, it's connected to the stuff that I still do. It's just fun to know some languages.
You also live in New Mexico, so Spanish is,
I do. Although you hear Spanish here less than you would think, because New Mexico is not a place that a whole lot of recent immigrants come.
Oh, sure.
They go to Texas, they go to California, they go to Arizona. They don't come to New Mexico as much. One reason seems to be that the economy is not as good here. So a lot of these immigrants come looking for jobs, and there aren't a lot of jobs here to get. So they don't come here. So there is a lot of Spanish heritage here. The University of New Mexico, where I teach, is the largest majority minority institution, academic institution in the country. In other words, over 50% of our students are not white. And it's not uncommon for me to be in a room and be a minority, racially or ethnically, because Hispanic or Latino is the most common ethnicity here. However, those students and anyone else I see around town are not almost never recent immigrants.
Sure.
Okay. And their parents aren't usually recent immigrants either.
That is
so
interesting.
They're not in they may be in a bilingual situation at home, but for them, Spanish is their heritage language, and they're only going to speak it with their family. And then when they talk to me or anybody else, they're going to speak English. And sometimes they even feel weird speaking Spanish with anyone who's not clearly ethnically Latino.
Huh. I hadn't thought about the New Mexico diglossia situation. That's an interesting topic in itself.
But speaking of linguistics, there is a very interesting dialect of English spoken here that essentially has developed from what was originally and still is bilingualism between the what would have been the Mexican citizens who lived here when after the time of the Mexican War, as is still said today, we didn't cross the border crossed us. So they lived here when it was part of Mexico over 150, almost 200 years ago. And then when this area became part of the United States, they became citizens of the United States per the terms of the treaty. So they learned English at that point. They were speaking Spanish before. They continued to speak Spanish, but they learned English. And the accent remained as part of their heritage as English speakers. So the dialect of New Mexico English is recognizable.
I have heard, I believe I have heard the accent you're talking about among older New Mexico Spanish-speaking or Spanish heritage population. And I believe that actually that population likes the term
and it's
Spanish.
Not something...
Like as opposed to Mexican.
Yeah, they do not use the term Mexican. They use the term Spanish, and usually even on the census they'll identify as Spanish from what I understand. Like they may bubble in Hispanic or Latino as their ethnicity, but they may specifically identify as Spanish. You're right. And this linguistic situation is different from what you get in other places like California, where immigrants might come in a few at a time, 10 at a time, 100 at a time, whatever. But then after a few generations, they're pretty assimilated, linguistically and maybe culturally. So the third generation of an immigrant who comes in from, say, Mexico or Central America today is likely to speak an English dialect that is indistinguishable from anyone else. Right, because there's not necessarily going to be a reason for them to have a different accent or want to have a different accent, which is why people have accents in the first place, because they're part of a speech community where it's showing that they belong to that community in some way, right?
Right.
So speakers here in New Mexico continue to, I think you could say intentionally, have an accent that's different from the standard Illinois Midwest accent that we call standard American today, however you want to refer to it. It started out as the Illinois accent, as we know, or Midwestern in general, centered on Illinois. Like, you know, we're basically speaking an Illinois accent. I mean, you have some traits of other things, and I have some traits of other things too, but Illinois is the basis of our speech right now, right?
I don't know that I identify
but
at all.
people in New Mexico may not necessarily have that Illinois accent.
Yeah. Because I was thinking when you said accents are part of identifying with the community, I thought, well, my community is pretty gone in some ways. But of course, I could assimilate more, whatever, right? But there's something there that keeps me identifying.
Sure.
With my grandparents in particular. Yeah. So this is a cool kind of topic we can come back to, is like sociolinguistics in New Mexico. But let me introduce my background a little bit too.
So tell us about your college career. I guess we sort of just overlapped there in our master's degree, and I'm sure you'll have more to say about that too. But how did you get there to the point that we met in our master's program?
I went to Texas Tech University for my undergrad, and I wanted, when I got there, to study ancient languages, and mistakenly started out as an anthropology major because I thought that was the way to get there. But anthropology at Texas Tech really didn't get into a lot of linguistic anthropology, which was kind of what I wanted. I also
was there a linguistics major?
No, there was not a linguistics major for undergrads.
Okay, all right, so that was not available to you.
Yeah, I also started off, this kind of parallels.
Yeah, same at my college.
It's not a common major, or if it is, it'll be like applied linguistics.
Right.
A weird parallel to you is I actually started as a Portuguese minor because I had been arrested shortly before I started college, and I realized that Brazil did not have an extradition agreement with the United States. That was part of my logic. There was some weird, tortured 17-year-old logic in that, but I was a pretty paranoid 17-year-old, so I actually started as a Brazilian Portuguese minor. Anyway, I switched in my first semester to a classics major because that was the only way to really get ancient languages. We did have Latin and Greek. And there was a linguistics minor, which was directed by one of the classics professors. So I signed up for that classics major, linguistics minor. So I got my bachelor's in December 2005. That was 2.5 years after I'd enrolled at Texas Tech because I just enrolled in tons of hours every semester. I hated being an undergrad. Spent a semester as a classics grad student at Texas Tech in spring '06, when I also TA'd in class on the Bronze Age, which was pretty cool, and one on ancient Egypt, actually, which was pretty cool. And then went to the University of Georgia, where I would meet you actually a year later, because I was 1 year ahead of you in that sequence, even though you're almost a year older than me. It was just because I had gone through undergrad so fast. I, of course, did the same historical linguistics focused linguistics masters as you with Dr. Klein, and studied all kinds of ancient languages there. Right, did Gothic, did Ultra-Slavic, did Sanskrit, and we did, of course, Klein's famous Indo-European class, where you kind of learn Proto-Indo-European through studying the grammar of all the different branches. That was a really fun class. Did my master's thesis on a topic in Old Icelandic syntax, touching on Bible translations because, of course, that was one of Dr. Klein's projects. And then...
Right. And my thesis was essentially on the same topic. I mean, you know, in Greek and Hebrew, but Bible translations.
Right. Mutatis mutandis. It was a big focus of Dr. Klein's. And then, like you, got a little bit more specific in language at the PhD level, went to the University of Wisconsin, got my PhD in Scandinavian Studies. Specifically, there were different tracks within the Scandinavian Studies PhD, and I did the philology track, which, of course, is mostly Old Norse language, paleography, a little bit of runes, although very few academics in the U.S. touch runes very seriously. Most of that was kind of self-education during that period and later. And so I was a PhD student at the University of Wisconsin from 2008 to 14, but in 2011, I was hired as full-time faculty at the University of California, Los Angeles in their Scandinavian section. So I was, like you, both well, I was writing my dissertation. I finished my classwork, but I was both student and, as far as my role at UCLA, professor at the same time. Went back to defend my dissertation, which was on color, taxonomy, and Old Norse at the University of Wisconsin for spring break 2014. Came back to UCLA and found out that my job no longer existed as of the coming year because of some academic drama involving a terrible person. Maybe one day we can get into that as a topic. It might be interesting for people. And so I went scrambling for a job, wound up as a clerk / janitor / very bored job applicant at a museum in the middle of Wyoming, a place that I love, but a job that I didn't. Got hired at the University of California, Berkeley for the next 2 years. And then after that, in 2017, I was hired at the University of Colorado, coincidentally, because I was born in Texas, but spent a lot of my formative years in Colorado and came to identify with it strongly. So it was a real coincidence that I wound up back here close to my grandma. That was wonderful for the last few years of her life. During those years teaching at UCLA, Berkeley, Colorado, I was always teaching Norse mythology, but I would also teach Old Norse language at UCLA, Norwegian language at UCLA, Icelandic language at UCLA. I taught classes like Vikings and sagas, occasionally history of the Scandinavian languages, which is a real fun topic for me. I enjoyed teaching that class. Although there was some weird registrar drama with that at UCLA that, again, might be a topic to get into the weeds with someday. And then I had also started in 2016 a YouTube channel talking about all of this stuff, Norse mythology, language, etc., because there's such an interest in it among the public, and I felt like it wasn't being served by people who actually knew what they were talking about. There are so many angry pagan guys talking about, you know, the truth as revealed to them by Odin or whatever on the internet. I felt like, well, I actually know what I'm talking about. Not to mention, I had begun actually translating the original sources of this material, beginning with the Poetic Edda in 2015. I thought, well, let me see if I can reach people with some good information about this and maybe try to draw some attention to these books that I'd started writing, published by Hackett Publishing. And I started a Patreon to support the YouTube channel, and to my surprise, by 2019, it was actually the main source of my income. And then in 2020, after a lot of soul searching and career advice, I actually went to a career counselor for a long time, I quit teaching at the University of Colorado, and since then I have actually paid my bills from Patreon and book royalties, and then, you know, other sort of things like some movie and video game consulting and that thing I did for the great courses and stuff like that. So I am a full-time, to use the grandiose title, public intellectual.
Yeah, and how great is that?
It's
I mean, having the public, you know, interested enough in your work to you know, meaningfully contribute to you and enable you to, I mean, in some ways cut out the middleman, right? Yeah. Like the university is a middleman that when, you know, and I'm still at the University of New Mexico and I love teaching there, but I'm quite aware that they make a lot of money on me, a lot. Yeah. From what I understand, I generate over $1 million a year in revenue for them.
Well, you and I both touch,
and I'm happy to do it, but I don't make $1 million a year, right. Or any significant percentage thereof, shall we say? Right. So, there is a middleman there. Now they provide the facilities, they provide the registration, they provide the accreditation. So they're doing a significant amount, but at the same time, you're bringing knowledge directly to people who are directly paying you what they think you're worth, which is
right.
valuable.
Well, no one has to pay tuition to watch my YouTube channel or your YouTube channel,
right?
And I think that's a major deal.
Yeah.
The main thing that middleman university provides is credibility, right?
Yes.
It
right.
does say something to people when you say, I teach at the University of New Mexico, right? You're not just a guy editing Wikipedia or something, right? You have the credibility that a major university says, we vouch for this guy, knowing what he's talking about. At the same time, you and I both have taught huge classes. And of course, that makes big money for the university and for the department. And we don't see that. I mean,
And to be clear, it's not just me that's not seeing it. Our department's not seeing it either. It's not like the money is going to somebody I know or somebody I believe in or something I believe in, right? Or some program that's affiliated. None of us are seeing it. It's disappearing into the bureaucratic ether, and who knows where it's going.
It was a little bit different at Colorado because Scandinavian was this sort of rump section of the German and Slavic department. Right, all the tenure track positions were in German and Slavic. So to the extent that money came into the department, it went to them. But the untenured Scandinavian faculty actually taught all of the most popular classes. So we were Scandinavian was like directly bankrolling German and Slavic, which is a kind of frustrating situation. Not the worst departmental situation I've been in. UCLA was definitely that. But anyway. And so this idea for doing a podcast came because, I mean, I listen to podcasts. Do you listen to many podcasts, Luke? I don't remember that you did.
Not many, no. I mean, it seems like an interesting thing, but I just haven't found time for it.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it's not something that I find time for. It's something to do when I'm driving or doing the laundry and stuff like that, right? It fills the air with something interesting to listen to. So I do understand that there's a place for that audio content like that. And occasionally with my YouTube channel, I get requests to do audio content like a podcast. Now I've done audio books and then the Great Courses thing that I did is available as on Audible too. But, I was reluctant to just do a podcast like my YouTube channel where I just handle some topic in Norse language or myth because it takes so much time and energy to go and do those videos. And I always pick out beautiful places to do them, and I do all this editing, and it would just burn me out to try to just repeat all of that in audio, right? And then the videos don't really make sense just as audio because there's so much text. But I thought, the podcasts that I enjoy listening to the most are the ones where you have a conversation between two people. And I thought, you are a natural partner in conversation. We could cover some academic topics, talk about videos that we've made, perhaps talk about other things, maybe play some games, that kind of thing. And have it be something different from the YouTube channel, and yet not something that felt like I was adding, a whole new rung of work on top of the YouTube channel and books and, answering a million emails and all that stuff. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of fun topics out there to talk about, right? So yeah, I'm looking forward to diving in and seeing what we discover.
Well, and by the way, I mentioned games. Do you want to try playing some Bible or Not with Claire?
I think this is a good time to have our inaugural broadcast of what will no doubt soon enough be the world hit game show Bible or Not.
So a little bit I'm going to text her and let her know we're about ready for it. I don't know how this works with 3 people, but a little bit of background about this. My sister Claire, much beloved sister Claire, good friend of both of us.
Bless her heart.
Yes. this is not making fun of her per se. It's more that the way that people are taught about the Bible, even in religious homes, so often paints the Bible as this is how I put it, as a rule book, but it's a rule book for being like us, so you don't really have to read it. But the Bible is a complex, fascinating document full of all kinds of really different books. And it's always kind of amused me.
Very diverse.
Yeah, and it's always amused me the way that a lot of people who are Christian or raised Christian really don't know anything about what's in it. So Claire is not being we're not making fun of Claire per se. She's being a good sport and standing in for a larger cultural loss. Now, there's a lot. And
Claire doesn't have any pretensions, right? So Claire is not claiming to know the Bible. She obviously, being her brother, you can speak to the environment she grew up in much better than I can. But you know, she's learned a lot about the Bible via osmosis, like many people.
Yeah.
And so, Bible or Not is a fun way to see what she has picked up by osmosis.
Right. Claire stands in.
Is that a good way of putting it?
Yes. Claire stands in for the everyman. She's a good sport about it.
Yeah.
And we've enjoyed playing this now and then. So what we're going to do, if we can figure out how to get 3 people on here, she told me 1-6, so maybe she's working on it, is we're going to have, I'm basing the format. We've actually been playing Bible or Not for like 2 years, 2.5 years, right? Oh, here's the Marquess of Madison.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But to try to make a format that will work for this podcast, I'm basing it on how my friend Connor Listoka and Mike Nelson do a game called Fanfic or Not in 372 pages. So we're going to give Claire 5 quotes, and they might all be from the Bible, or they might
one at a time.
Not be.
Are we doing one at a time?
Yes,
or?
one at a time. And Claire, are you there?
Okay.
Claire? Sure.
Just take your Bible and put it up to the camera, and we'll accept that.
So we'll give her 5 quotes. They might all be from the Bible. They might all not be. I want her to say, as we go, Bible or not. She can take a little bit of time to justify it. Okay, here she is. I'll explain to her.
And I believe you've randomized the order.
No,
I have randomized the order.
Work for me. Okay.
I've rolled dice. Hey, Claire, how are you doing?
Claire, where's the Bible?
In my bedroom.
Well, that's good, because that means you can't look up answers. So this is all on the up and up.
Work setups. No, I'm kidding. What's up?
Are there Bible quotes in your work setup?
I don't think so. It's not Forever 21.
Okay, then it's permitted. We'll allow that. Yeah,
live from Los Angeles, it's Bible or Not.
We need some audience noise, like cheering at this point.
I'll do it in post. So, Claire, we're going to give you 5 quotes.
Okay.
They might all be from the Bible. They might all not be. Or they might be some combination thereof. We're going to do this basically like fanfic or real. You know that from 372 pages?
Yeah, now you're talking about.
Okay. So we're going to give you a quote. We want you to say if it's Bible or not. You can give us like a little bit of justification. And then at the end, we're going to reveal to you which ones were Bible and which ones were not.
This is a terrible idea, but okay.
All right, so
define terrible, Claire.
What? You say define terrible idea?
It was a nitpicky linguistic question. We'll move on.
So Luke, give us our first quote.
Okay, here's your first Bible or Not quote of the series, Claire. For hateful in my eyes, even as the gates of Hades, is that man that hideth one thing in his mind and saith another.
Not.
It's a favorite of mine.
I don't think so.
What makes you say that?
Okay, you're going not. Do you have any justification?
Hades is a Greek term, or Roman, or I don't know anymore. And they would have said Satan.
Okay, well, you are correct. That was not the Bible. That was a quote from Achilles in the Iliad. And you are correct. It is a Greek term. And Hades is the Greek afterlife, essentially. So very good, Claire. 1 for 1. Should we just stop there? She's 100%.
So are we going to go with this format where we tell her with each one? Okay.
I don't know. Claire, should I have said that?
It works for now.
I mean, this is y'all's
Claire,
pilot
are you ready
episode.
for quote number 2?
Do what you want to do.
Yeah, we'll work it out.
All right, Claire, you ready?
See.
So I prophesied as I was commanded, and as I was prophesying, there was a noise, a rattling sound, and the bones came together, bone to bone. I looked, and tendons and flesh appeared on them, and skin covered them, but there was no breath in them.
Not.
What's your justification?
Just the bone to bone and the noises, and it sounds Lord of the Ring-ish to me.
I'm sorry, Claire, that was Bible.
Oh, where was that? Is there a Lord of the Rings book?
I read to you Ezekiel 37:7-8. There actually is, in fact, the valley of dry bones which come to life as Ezekiel is prophesying before the Lord.
Okay, but hold up. I'm going to spin this real quick. So I do know that Tolkien was, he was a Christian. Did he get his cave of dead people from that? Possibly?
I don't know if there's that much similar between the two scenes.
That's just what reminded me of it. You see what I'm saying?
So you're thinking of when Aragorn and Gimli and Legolas go through the cave in Return of the King. Interesting. I've never made that connection.
Not raise them up, but they came together.
But
no, that's interesting. I've never made that connection before.
Actually, but
it's really hard to say where motifs come from, right? Like they're just kind of floating around, and Tolkien could have gotten that from a number of places. But he certainly knew the Bible.
Okay.
Actually,
most people
who had failed to uphold their oaths to the kings of Arnor, of which Aragorn was a descendant.
Why are you being
that's a pretty different
South Park voice?
All right, Luke, give us our third quote.
Claire, your third quote is, "The sea gave up the dead that were in it, and death and Hades gave up the dead that were in them, and each person was judged according to what they had done."
Again, not because Hades. Final answer.
All right, Claire, I'm sorry to report that was Bible.
Where did they mention Hades? I mean, I've never read it. Where?
Well, we could probably have a whole series of podcasts just on this, but the New Testament is heavily influenced by Greek culture. It's written in Greek. So this is from the book of Revelation, chapter 20. It was verse 13.
Oh.
So next to last chapter in the Bible. And in the New Testament, they frequently call the afterlife, or the bad afterlife at least, Hades, because they're living in a Greek culture. And so they just use the Greek term.
Okay, well that makes sense. I could see that. Okay.
Claire,
in the same way that hell is also not an ancient Israelite term. It's a Germanic term.
So what did they call it? Just the bad afterlife.
In ancient Hebrew, it was Sheol, Sheol, was the dark cave underground that everybody went to, essentially.
Okay. I didn't know that. Okay.
But it's very similar to Hades. It's very similar to the Greek conception of Hades. Somewhat less similar to the Germanic conception of hell. There's some similarities.
Brimstone and all that.
Yeah, there was not brimstone in Sheol or Hades, unless you went to one particular part of Hades where the really bad people were. But most people
like Dante's Inferno.
Yeah, kind of like how there's different levels of hell in Dante's Inferno. He may have gotten that idea from the complicated geography of ancient Greek Hades.
So what's next up? How can I embarrass
Claire, are you ready for quote number 4?
Yes.
All right. But you toiled away, and what did you achieve? You exhaust yourself with ceaseless toil. You fill your sinews with sorrow, bringing forward the end of your days. Man is snapped off like a reed in a canebrake. The comely young man, the pretty young woman, all too soon in their prime, death abducts them.
I think Claire has a tattoo of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like something you would have. I wasn't going to tell people where it was.
It'd be a pop quiz. If I'm honest, I don't know. I want to say Bible, but the part that's making me hesitate is how specific it is to the young men and young women, or young man and young woman.
Well,
But
what's your
I'm gonna go with Bible. I'm gonna be different. Bible. Damn it.
That is not in the Bible.
From?
That is from Gilgamesh.
Gilgamesh? I haven't read that since high school.
Yeah.
But to be fair to Claire, there are plenty of overlaps between Gilgamesh and especially the Hebrew Bible or Old Testament.
Yeah.
So there are verses that echo a lot of that in some of the prophets, like Isaiah talking about the young men and women who are not going to be celebrating in the streets anymore.
Well, in that word,
Noah's
Ark.
Yeah, it's definitely
Noah's Ark.
Definitely where what?
There's similar stories.
Yeah, similar stories of the flood in both Gilgamesh and Genesis.
I wrote
Absolutely.
my final paper on that in one of my classes in college because it blew my mind.
Yeah, it's super cool.
Certified.
All right, Claire. Yes, here is your fifth quote. Be a friend to your friend, and repay each gift with a gift. Repay laughter with laughter. Repay treachery with treachery.
I'm going to go with Bible. And it sounds like Old Testament Bible.
I'm sorry, Claire. That is not in the Bible.
I thought you wanted... I mean, what? Where's it from? If you say Lord of the Rings.
It's Havamal, stanza 40. It's Havamal. It's the Old Norse. It's Odin's wisdom. So,
My bad.
Claire, you are at 20%. Strong start. You are definitely our leading contestant in Bible.
Is this going to be...
You know, at least she's not in negative territory like those contestants on Jeopardy.
And who else are you going to play Bible or not with? I am Bible or not.
Well, that's what I mean.
That was kind of like Emperor Palpatine saying, I am the Senate.
You can't have Bible or not without me acting ridiculous and annoying Travis.
It's true. It's true. It's true. Yeah. Well, thank you, Claire. Hey, is there a games night experience tonight? Or are we bellying that because everyone is out of town?
Let me text. Are we doing Wordle and all those things still?
Oh, do we want to talk about our Wordle scores today while
it's
Claire's
probably
on
a good idea.
here?
I need to make sure I'm playing the right one again. Because I haven't played
Wordle.
I mean, like the current version.
Oh, yeah. Well, we'll find out pretty quick.
Yeah,
I mean, have you played today?
After y'all posted it, I went through and played them all.
So Wordle today was...
What'd you get? Jackson and I both got 3 of 6.
Me? I got 5 of 6.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, so... And by the way, in my usual way, so the word is liver.
Yeah, okay. So
I actually started by guessing...
And we're going to be posting this after the day is over, so this is not giving any spoilers.
I started by guessing later. That's one of my rotation of starting words.
Which is a great starting guess.
Real close. Yeah.
Man,
but then my next guess was ledger. So it could have been...
Ledger? How'd you spell that?
Leger. So it could have been a twofer for me if I had thought about it. But often they do have a less common word than what you're expecting.
And you could have guessed loner. So loner was still out there for you.
Or liger.
So it could have taken you 4 if you had guessed lone or third.
And then there's Versal, where the Bible verse to guess was, if it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. And I knew that was from some Pauline epistle, but, you know, I just shotgunned around until I got to the right one.
I was actually fairly sure it was either from Romans or 1 Peter, because both of those epistles are very conciliatory toward the Roman government. Even more than normal. Not everything in the New Testament is that conciliatory toward the Roman government, but Romans and 1 Peter really are. So I was pretty sure it was one of those two. I guess 1 Peter first. It wasn't that, so I went to Romans and it was that. And then it took me a few more guesses to get the exact reference. Although I knew, based on my knowledge of the structure of Romans, that it would have to be between chapters 12 and 15. Like that was the only place that kind of admonition could be in Romans. Because really, chapters 1 through 11 are this like really dense, heavy theological treatise, and Paul wouldn't say something like that in the middle of it. So I knew it was after 12.
My philosophy.
Okay. So
you want to know? You want to know mine? Mine's fun. I said, this sounds like a happy verse. That was Proverbs.
Is Proverbs happy?
I don't know. It seems happy. And then I started jumping around and I never got it.
And then the extremely difficult Wordle today.
Oh, man. Hardest one since the United States of America.
Yeah, I sat with this one for
maybe
a long
2 months
time.
ago.
It's really rude of y'all.
Claire, did you get this one?
I did not. I got to Hungary and Romania, and I went, oh God, what's around there?
You're joking.
No. Do you want me to send it to you? Here, I'll show it.
No, I don't want to see this. And then I do Icelandic Wordle.
Wait, that's not... Wait, what is that? That was not our Wordle. Was that your Wordle today?
It's Georgia.
Jackson?
Hold on.
That was not my Wordle today.
I don't see...
I thought it was...
Different people get different ones?
I didn't think so.
What did y'all get?
The UK.
Jackson, did we get the same thing? A very easy one?
The UK?
Oh,
yeah,
no,
I got the UK.
Georgia.
Yeah.
And I just want to say that I haven't seen Georgia at all as the right guess since I've been playing
Maybe
it.
That's tomorrow's?
Huh.
Is it possible that Claire just spoiled tomorrow's for us?
Find out. Hold on.
Maybe, but...
That would be weird. That would be very weird. I don't know how that would work.
Well, hold on. Wordle is hosted in France. So...
But I'm pretty sure it's based on time zone like any of these other games. So is it possible that Claire's phone thinks she's in China or some other time zone where it's already tomorrow? Claire, when did you play? This is riveting content, by the way. What time did you play Wordle on this day?
2 hours ago.
Okay, so yeah, it was tomorrow in East Asia for sure.
I mean, it'll be interesting to know if it was.
Even the Middle East. Well, yeah, we'll let you know if it's Georgia tomorrow.
Sorry, I thought it was. I was like, well, maybe they got it because y'all lived in the state of Georgia and you just know these things.
and we're just constantly paying attention to what happened in the Republic of Georgia. I mean, I guess it did make the news that Russia was invading Georgia stand out of my mind more when that happened.
Sure, because we were in Georgia when that happened. The state thereof.
And then I've been playing Control.
Control, yeah. Control's fun.
That was hard for me.
Well, did you notice, am I going crazy, or did they just change Control where it doesn't have to be a country anymore? Like, this is the first time since I've been playing it in the past month or two that it's been a territory and not a country.
I did notice that let me put Puerto Rico, but then I couldn't put...
Right, which is not a country. Yeah. And that made me suspicious,
and then I
too,
to put the
until I got it.
Islands, and it wouldn't register that. And then it wasn't registering the Virgin Islands either, or British Virgin.
Right. I noticed that as well. So it seems like they've expanded the repertoire to some select territories.
It's a little
like whatever they feel like.
Well, there
like
is
Puerto
a
Rico,
classic, and there is a create, whatever that means. I did notice that their platform changed. There's a bunch of other things on it now.
Yeah, it's way more ad-based now, which is not great.
It's annoying.
That's probably when it changed, because that was like last week, I think, right? Pretty recently.
In a while.
It's pretty recently, yeah. So I bet they changed it, added a bunch of ads to try to really make a bunch of money, and then added some territories, even though it's called Country O. So that doesn't make sense, but whatever.
Well.
And then I play Icelandic Wordle Orðið, and the word was Alnacht.
I could have gotten
and
that.
I got that in 4. So
I could have done that.
Have you guys played Quordle or Octordle?
No,
These are actually quite a bit of fun. It's like Wordle. It's exactly like Wordle, but you're guessing 4 or 8 words at the same time. So with Quordle, you get 9 guesses to guess the 4 words. And with Octordle, you get 13 guesses to guess the 8 words.
Wow.
And it's like the first time you play it, it'll blow your mind, but then you'll sort of get the hang of it. And I mean, especially with Octordle, you get 13 guesses, you're going to be guessing most of the letters, right? So like, in some ways it's easier than Wordle, because you just guess a whole bunch of different letters in the first 3 guesses. All the common ones should all be out there like
That's
that.
True.
And then just see what you can do.
Are we adding
your
this?
common ones, your Z's, your X's, your Q's.
Are we going to start adding this?
Yeah, Guess pizza.
Are we going to start doing this every day again?
Well, we should do it with as many games as we can right now and over the next 16 days, just so Travis comes back to a thermonuclear bomb of notifications.
He will immediately remove himself from our group text and never come back.
He'll have like 7,300 notifications, and 1/3 of them will be the link to Wordle because no one ever gets that out.
It's terrible.
Oh my gosh.
Assuming I don't tell you all the answers every day.
Well, you're welcome to continue doing it.
Okay. Thanks.
It does help the cause.
So how's the pilot episode coming, or whatever they call it, the first pilot?
I mean, you're participating in it, so what do you think?
It's fun. I mean, it feels kind of game.
Claire, you're on live with Ling Circus. What do you think of the name? That's the best I can come up with.
Ling Circus? I kind of laughed when I saw it.
That's good. Mission accomplished.
Okay.
Well, it's lighthearted. We're not solving any world problems here. There's plenty of podcasts for that.
Well, not yet, at least.
You never know. Something might set y'all off one day. Ling Circus. So explain that. Is that like linguistic? 2 linguistics in y'all's circus? Or linguist? Wow, I'm dumb.
That's what we were going for.
I'm sorry.
Kind of
Did I just ruin this?
Like a 3-ring circus?
No. Oh! I get it now. I laughed because I just thought it was like just two people talking about languages.
Yeah. Claire, do you remember going to the circus when we were kids? We occasionally would.
The Barnum and Bailey or whatever it was called?
Yeah, that kind of thing.
I remember.
Yeah. Right, so wasn't that Barnum and Bailey's 3-ring circus or something like that?
I don't remember. I don't remember.
I don't actually know what the ring is about. I think is it like the ring in which you perform? Is there like 3 rings?
I think so, because
question.
I don't know. Well, in things I've seen since, it seems like there are certain rings on the ground, and they'll put the elephants there or the acrobats here or whatever. This is probably what it is.
Hey, so actually, just on the fly, this is a good game for Ling Circus. Guess the etymology, and right now we just hit one. What is the etymology of 3-ring circus? So let me see if I can actually find some kind of answer to this.
Now you're gonna need a.
I mean, we can start with circus, right? I've never looked it up, but I assume it's related to circle. It's a ring. Speaking of three-ring circus, it's a ring in like a stadium or something in which the events are happening. Going all the way back to Roman times, the Circus Maximus, for instance. Circus Maximus.
And Circus is the Kuklos word, right? Just with some
absolutely.
metathesis?
Yeah,
that's what I was thinking.
I think so.
So,
because that was quolos. It was actually reduplication originally, quolos. And then different subgroups, dealt with that in different ways.
And it's our wheel word.
And it's chakra. It's chakra in Sanskrit.
Right, chakra.
So all of you yoga fans out there. Or, other kind of medicinal arts.
Just something that I can quickly look up on, Wiktionary. It looks like basically what I was guessing. A large circus in which 3 separate performances, each within its own circular enclosure, are staged simultaneously before a large audience.
Yeah.
So
3 things going on at once. Big circus.
So we're 2 linguists going on at once. So
yeah.
Guess the etymology.
And then Lord of the Rings, how does that fit into that, Claire?
Because there's one ring to rule them all. Fair?
Okay.
The phrase Lord of the Rings, Ringa Druchten, occurs in Beowulf. Beowulf, I think actually Beowulf is Lord of the Rings because that whole Germanic ideal of gift-giving, right? So the Lord of the Rings is the successful war chief who hands out rings to his men.
That's interesting.
Anyway, I think it's fun.
Which is not entirely different from Sauron.
Right.
Slight overlap. Again, another thing that we could try to figure out if Tolkien got his ideas from one particular source.
It kind of makes sense. I mean, he was a linguist himself. He probably read those.
I am sure that the
although,
from
what I understand of the development of that plot line was pretty organic. He didn't have the title Lord of the Rings picked out ahead of time. He didn't even have the title for Sauron picked out ahead of time. It sort of just
he just said
evolved.
Evil man.
So
until he went, I got you.
Well, Sauron was called the Necromancer in The Hobbit.
Oh, yeah.
And he already knew about the character of Sauron from the Silmarillion writings. But this whole idea of the rings and everything developed.
So when did he, wait, hold on. So I know The Hobbit was written first, right? And then
before Lord of the Rings, but after the Silmarillion
Silmarillion was written. I didn't realize it was written before. I thought it was written as a result.
He started working on that in he started working on the
in World War I.
World War I, yeah.
Oh wow.
It says
in the trenches. There's some trench notes that
that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
I mean, sad but cool. So wait.
But he didn't publish it during his lifetime. It was published after he died by his son Christopher.
And only because Lord of the Rings got popular did anyone want to publish it.
Right.
So when did he start?
Oh yeah, because he wanted to publish the Silmarillion with Lord of the Rings, right? And his publisher
and they're like, no.
Oh, as like a dictionary of the sort or something like that.
Well, that was his first love. The Silmarillion was really his first love throughout his whole life.
Huh. So when did he start?
Man, that would make a great series or something if anyone actually wanted to make some kind of series of movies, shows. I don't know. It would be incredible if it was done well.
I mean, there's that one on Amazon.
The Amazon one's like second age, yeah. Yeah, but the first age, man, that's where all the really great stories are.
So Lord of the Rings takes place in the Age of Men or whatever?
Third age, yeah.
Okay. Oh, right, because there's all the ruins and stuff that they come across. Interesting. Yeah. Man, I wish I had the patience to read.
But a lot of those ruins are... Well, Claire, I have the copy of the Silmarillion that you gave me in 2005.
I did do that, didn't I?
If you ever want to look at it.
Well, I have the Lord of the Rings
Christmas
books, right? Or I have it's the complete series. But I've only read Fellowship, and I've read the first few chapters of Two Towers, and just could not get myself to go back to it. And that was college, so it's been a while.
So you've come a long way since then. is what you're saying. So I think it's time to give it another try.
With the way gas prices are right now,
it's Tolkien or not.
Back to just sitting in my apartment with my cat reading nerd books, which is not unusual.
I hear you. Well, Luke, you had
all right. Well, shall we wrap this up?
Now,
yeah.
Right? Yeah. So
yeah,
I think that was a fun, provisional start to this. We'll see if people are interested in the idea. Folks out there on my Patreon, let me know what you think about this experimental format, and if it's something people like, we'll try to record these a little bit more regularly. And maybe we'll come back to some of these topics. We dipped our toe into so many things: sociolinguistics of New Mexico, the Silmarillion, and maybe actually just getting into some of the details of our lives as academics and some of the stories that that wouldn't necessarily come up on my YouTube channel, but like what does a career like this look like? What are some of these challenges? I think all of that could be interesting. So for now, from beautiful Colorado, I'm wishing you all the best, and y'all can do the same from beautiful New Mexico and beautiful Texas if y'all want.
Beautiful New Mexico. It is beautiful. Underrated.
We're in a heat wave.
Extremely underrated.
Houston? Is Houston beautiful and underrated, Claire?
Overheated and overrated. No, I'm kidding. I love Houston. I don't like the heat.
Well, that's the Marquess of Madisonville for you. All right, all the